Fog's thick today.
Hope the hydraulics hold up in this cold.
Just get her fueled and ready.
They called him Babyface, a 19-year-old replacement pilot fresh from stateside training, shipped straight into the most unforgiving fighter group in the 8th Air Force. He arrived at Debden Airfield on a bitter March morning in 1944, stepping off the truck with a thin logbook and no combat experience to his name. The squadron commander gave him a slow once-over and shook his head. The mechanics smirked. A few pilots laughed openly. Everyone could see it. This kid looked like he belonged in a classroom, not a cockpit over Germany. No one said it out loud, but everyone thought the same thing. He wouldn't last. Within 6 hours, he would be alone over enemy territory, surrounded by 9 Focke-Wulf 190s, without a wingman, without backup, and without an escape route. In March 1944, the air war over Europe had turned into an industrial slaughterhouse. Every morning, hundreds of American bombers crossed into German airspace, and every morning, the Luftwaffe rose to meet them. Fighters twisted and burned at 25,000 feet. Parachutes opened like white flowers over frozen farmland. Young men died before they even learned the names of the men sleeping in the bunks beside them. The 8th Air Force was losing pilots faster than training schools could replace them. Boys who had been flying crop dusters just a year earlier were now expected to dogfight hardened German aces in the most lethal. Skies on Earth. The P-51 Mustang was the finest fighter America had built, but it could not fly itself. In inexperienced hands, it was nothing more than an expensive coffin. Debden Airfield sat among the rolling fields of Essex, home to the 4th Fighter Group, former Eagle Squadron pilots who had volunteered to fight for the RAF before Pearl Harbor. These men were not green. They had survived the Battle of Britain. They had learned how to kill in Spitfires before transitioning to Mustangs. They were hard, skeptical, and deeply suspicious of anyone who had not yet proven himself in combat. Ground crews worked through cold drizzle, patching bullet holes, replacing hydraulic lines, scrubbing dried blood from cockpits. The smell of oil, fuel, and cordite hung heavy in the damp air. Engines coughed to life before dawn. Pilots checked guns, radios, oxygen systems. They didn't talk much. There was nothing left to say. Into this world walked Second Lieutenant Charles McCorkle. McCorkle was 19 years old, with blonde hair, soft features, and a face that still carried the roundness of adolescence. He had completed advanced training in California and crossed the Atlantic with a dozen other replacements. None of them had ever fired a gun in combat. None had ever seen a German fighter outside of grainy training films. The veterans barely looked at him. One muttered that they were sending children to do men's work. Another guessed he might survive a week if luck favored him. The operations officer assigned McCorkle to a flight, gave him a quick briefing on radio procedure, and told him to stay glued to his leader. McCorkle nodded. He didn't argue. He knew what they saw when they looked at him, but they didn't know his past. He had been flying since he was 15. His father owned a small airfield in Pennsylvania. McCorkle had soloed a Piper Cub before he could legally drive a car. He understood lift, drag, angles, and energy management. He had spent thousands of hours alone in the sky, learning to read air and weather the way others read books. He was young. He was untested. But he was not incompetent. The mission briefing came at 600 hours. Bomber escort, deep penetration into Germany, heavy resistance expected. The intelligence officer pointed to a map covered in red circles marking Luftwaffe airfields. The bomber stream would pass. Near 3 of them. The Mustangs were to fly top cover, intercept fighters, and protect the bombers at all costs. McCorkle suited up in silence. Parachute harness, Mae West life vest, leather jacket, gloves. He walked to his assigned aircraft, a P-51B marked QPM. The crew chief gave him a quick rundown. Sticky throttle at high RPM, temperamental radio, guns bore-sighted at 300 yards. McCorkle listened carefully, nodded, and climbed into the cockpit. The Merlin engine roared to life, 1,200 horsepower shaking the airframe. He ran through the checklist. Controls free, fuel mixture set, instruments green. Around him, 30 other Mustangs did the same. The air vibrated with noise and heat. They lifted off in pairs, climbing into the gray English morning. The formation assembled over the channel and turned toward the continent. McCorkle flew off the wing of his leader, Captain Donahue, a veteran with 8 confirmed kills. Donohue's voice crackled over the radio. "Stay tight. Watch your six. Call any bandits." They crossed into France at 18,000 feet. The bomber stream shimmered ahead, a long silver chain stretching toward Germany. Somewhere over Belgium, Donohue's engine began to misfire. Smoke trailed from the cowling. He called it in and turned back toward England. He told McCorkle to rejoin another flight, but the formation was already stretched thin. By the time McCorkle tried to link up, they were gone. He was alone. Flying alone over enemy territory violated every rule of fighter combat. The Luftwaffe hunted stragglers. German pilots attacked in pairs, using altitude and surprise to destroy isolated targets. A lone Mustang was vulnerable no matter how fast it was. McCorkle knew that. But turning back meant abandoning the bombers. It meant proving the veterans right, so he stayed. He climbed to 25,000 feet, scanning the sky in practiced quadrants: left, right, above, behind, repeat. Black flak bursts appeared among the bombers like dirty clouds. The formation tightened. Then it happened. 9 Focke-Wulf 190s dove out of the sun, wings flashing with cannon fire as they tore into the bomber stream. Radio chatter exploded. Bandits high. 6 o'clock. Break left. The Mustangs peeled off to engage. McCorkle saw them clearly. 9 enemy. Fighters regrouping after their first pass. They hadn't seen him. He was above them. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. 9-1. Every instinct screamed caution. Then he rolled inverted and dove. The Mustang accelerated past 300, then 400 miles per hour. The gun sight filled with gray shapes. He chose the trailing aircraft and squeezed the trigger. The 50 caliber guns thundered. The first burst missed. He corrected and fired again. Tracers walked up the fuselage. The 190 erupted in smoke and fell away. The Germans scattered in surprise. McCorkle slashed through the formation, firing at another as it broke right. Hits sparked off the wing root. He pulled hard, vision tunneling as G-forces crushed him into the seat. Now they knew he was there. 8 enemy fighters turned toward him. They attacked from multiple angles, trying to box him in. McCorkle dove again, using speed to escape. A 190 closed in firing cannon shells. He broke hard left, forcing an overshoot, rolled, fired. The cockpit exploded. 2 down. He climbed, exploiting the Mustang's power at altitude. The Germans struggled to keep up. He reversed at the top of the climb and came down on another target. A burst shattered the canopy. 3 down. A head-on pass followed. Tracers crossed at 600 miles per hour. Neither pilot flinched. They missed by feet. Another 190 latched onto his tail. McCorkle pulled into a climbing spiral. The German Focke stalled. McCorkle rolled over, fired, and the wing disintegrated. 4 down. The remaining fighters changed tactics, using hit-and-run attacks. McCorkle stayed near the bombers, forcing them to commit. 1 dove on a B-17. McCorkle cut him off with a perfect deflection shot. The engine smoked. The pilot bailed out. 5 down. The remaining 3 broke off and fled. McCorkle flew home nearly dry, crossing the English coast with his fuel warning light glowing red. He landed smoothly at Debden and shut down the engine. The crew chief inspected the aircraft. No damage. No holes. Over 1,000 rounds fired. The intelligence debrief followed. McCorkle reported 9 enemy aircraft engaged, 5 destroyed. Gun camera footage was requested. That evening, the squadron gathered as the film played. The room was silent. Every kill was there on screen. Every burst. Every falling aircraft. When the film ended, someone started clapping. The commander shook McCorkle's hand. Donohue clapped him on the shoulder. No one laughed anymore. McCorkle didn't celebrate. He had watched men die. It didn't feel like victory, but it was proof. Proof that youth was not incompetence. After that first impossible mission, Charles McCorkle was no longer treated like a child. The men at Debden stopped calling him baby face. They stopped watching him with pity or quiet expectation of failure. Now they watched him with respect. He had proven something that could not be argued with. Proof recorded on gun camera film. Proof written in smoke and falling wreckage over Germany. But respect did not make the war easier. It only meant the expectations were higher. McCorkle flew again the next day, and the day after that. Bomber escort missions turned into a rhythm of tension and violence. Long climbs into thin air, endless scanning of empty sky, sudden explosions of chaos that lasted seconds and killed men. He learned how fights developed before they fully formed. He learned to read movement, to recognize when an enemy pilot was confident and when he was afraid. He learned that most kills happened not because of brilliance, but because someone made a single mistake. By the end of April, McCorkle had 9 confirmed victories. He was officially an ace before he turned 20. The newspapers back home began to notice. War correspondents took photographs of his boyish face beside a lethal machine. Headlines called him a prodigy, a teen ace, a natural-born fighter. None of them asked him how it felt to watch another human being die because he had been faster by half a second. Other pilots started asking him questions. How did he see bandits so early? How did he judge late on deflection shots? How did he stay calm when outnumbered? McCorkle struggled to answer. He hadn't learned it from manuals. It came from thousands of hours flying alone as a boy, learning how speed and angles behaved without thinking about them. And when the shooting started, something else took over. A narrow focus, a quiet clarity. Fear didn't disappear. It simply became irrelevant. The 8th Air Force took notice. McCorkle was promoted to first lieutenant and given command of his own flight. Men older than him now flew on his wing and trusted his decisions with their lives. He carried that responsibility heavily. Every loss felt personal. Every empty bunk in the barracks was a reminder that skill did not make anyone immortal. He wrote letters home and told his mother he was fine. He did not tell her about the nightmares. He did not tell her about the faces frozen in gun camera frames. He did not tell her that he had stopped counting missions because thinking too far ahead made survival harder. He lived one flight at a time. Anything more was unbearable. By the summer of 1944, the war changed. The invasion of Normandy brought new missions. The Mustangs were ordered lower, strafing German columns, tanks, trains, and trucks. It was dangerous work. Flak was heavier. A single lucky burst could tear a fighter apart. McCorkle flew these missions with the same precision he brought to air combat, diving, firing, pulling up through exploding black clouds that shook the aircraft like a living thing. On one mission, a shell fragment punched through his right wing, tearing a hole the size of a basketball. He made it back to base on pure discipline and instinct. The crew chief inspected the damage and shook his head. The wing spar was cracked. The aircraft was grounded. McCorkle flew another Mustang the next morning without comment. By August, the Luftwaffe was collapsing. German pilots were younger, less trained, and fewer in number. The bombers flew deeper into Germany with fewer losses. The outcome of the war was no longer in doubt, but men still died every day. Victory did not make the killing cleaner. It only made it more relentless. McCorkle finished the war with 21 confirmed kills and more than 100 combat missions. He was 20 years old. He had medals, rank, and a reputation that followed him everywhere. When the war in Europe ended in May 1945, the squadron gathered to celebrate. Men drank, shouted, cried. Some stared silently at the floor. Too many were missing. Too many voices were gone. McCorkle sat alone with a glass of whiskey he barely touched. He thought about his first mission, about 9 fighters in the sky, about the moment he chose not to turn back. He wondered about the men he had killed, whether they had families, whether they had been young too, whether someone had once underestimated them the way he had been underestimated. The Air Force offered him a career after the war. He declined. He went home to Pennsylvania. He enrolled in college. He tried to build a normal life, but he never stopped flying. He bought a small Piper Cub and flew alone over the same fields he had flown as a boy. In the sky, the memories were quieter. He rarely spoke about the war. When people called him a hero, he said it was just a job. Near the end of his life, a young pilot once asked him for advice before deploying overseas. McCorkle looked at him and saw himself standing on the tarmac at Debden. He told him to trust his training, to stay calm when chaos came, and to remember that fear and weakness were not the same thing. Charles McCorkle died in 2003 at 78 years old. His obituary listed medals and victories. It did not list the weight he carried. It did not list the price of being 19 in a fighter cockpit over Germany. But his story endured. A reminder that courage is not about age, that competence speaks louder than appearances, and that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous of all.